I've been playing Loomian Legacy since it was released, and although I'm probably more knowledgeable about it than most people, I've always wondered what the best possible team to beat the game with is. With the newly released Atlantean City Part 2 update, what better time to make a video about the best possible team to beat the story of the game? Assuming the next update is going to take another year or two to come out, probably now. There's quite a few tough fights in the game. Not just as far as battle theaters go, but you'd need to take into account corrupt battles, antagonist battles, and even rival battles. This game is pretty tricky because despite not being finished, there are quite a few brutal fights, and type matchups vary quite a bit. Some Loomians are great early on, like Eaglet, but as you progress through the story, they might get less and less useful and eventually might not even be viable at all. So what really is the best team, you think? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. Before we start, there's a few things I want to get out of the way. For the sake of my, your, and everyone else's sanity, I will only be including Loomians that are easily accessible in most parts of the game. This means no event Loomians. Events are temporary, which means they're hard to get, and even if you have someone willing to trade you one, that doesn't mean everyone does. No roamers. Roamers have such a low encounter chance, you might as well just overlevel and throw yourself at the battle theaters over and over again until you win. We want to win as many fights as we can with as high of a chance as we can as fast as we can, so they won't be added to the team. I'll make an exception for soft resettable roamers like Mutagon, Cephalops, and Elephage though, since they're fairly easy to obtain and have high stats. I will also be following level caps. Like I said, you could easily overlevel and steamroll the game with pretty much any Loomian, but I'm trying to look at the team that excels at the most battles without overleveling. I'll also only be looking at a maximum team of 5 total Loomians. No switching members, no replacing members. If I add a Loomian to the team, it's going to be permanent. But I might also have some honorable mentions depending on the accessibility of the Loomian. Inevitably, this video will become outdated, so if it does well, I might make some follow-ups as more updates eventually come out because, like I said, the game is still not finished. Now, please be sure to tell me in the comments if you want to see that, since that is by far the best way to let me know if you enjoyed something I made. But anyways, without further ado, here we go. No matter what you do, you're gonna have to pick a starter. This is a big choice because it's going to be the main Loomian you rely on for the beginning chunk of the game. Given the fact that there's only 7 starters, not all types get covered. We only get a choice between fire, water, plant, light, dark, ice, and electric, which means we'd still be missing 10 more types. And although, yes, the starters do all evolve into Loomians that have 2 types, the beginning of the game is where they're the most important since your options before the first few battle theaters are much more limited. Given all of these factors, I think Eaglet is probably the best starter. I mentioned this in my video where I nuzlocked Loomian Legacy, but Eaglet starts off as Light type, which is already good against the first important battle in the game, which is the Corrupt Dusket, since Light type is immune to Spirit type, and Dusket, despite Brainwash, has mostly Spirit type moves. Eaglet gets Shine at level 5, which is super effective, meaning he could solo Dusket. Moving on to the first battle theater, Eaglet still shines bright since the battle theater is half Light type and half Dark type, and Dark type, despite being super effective against Light type, is also weak to it, which means Eaglet could do some decent damage there, and since Light type also resists Light type, you could switch into Eaglet as a pivot into another Loomian. The only thing you'd have to worry about is Naya's Kleptyke because of its 95 speed stat, which could use Pilfer and do significant damage to Eaglet. After this, it goes on to do neutral damage to most of the Loomians in the next battle theaters, while also not being weak to most of them. All in all, Eaglet is probably the most optimal choice of starters. Now, beyond starters, the game gets a little more tricky, but I believe Geklo might be the next best Loomian to have on your team.
But Jack! Geklo evolves into Aliquana, which is Light type, and that conflicts with our starter Eaglet.
Yes, you're right. Eliguana is Light type, which does slightly hinder its coverage of Eaglet's weaknesses, but hear me out. It's accessible on the 3rd route, right before the first battle theater, and Electric type is strong against Metal, which would be useful against the 3rd Metal battle theater, aside from on Tyrex, which is part Earth type, meaning it's immune. It's also very useful for one of the most terrifying fights in the game, being the corrupt Samarine, which, according to Brad himself, has a total of 500 health as well as being level 40. But luckily with Geklo's high ranged attack stat and Samarine's relatively low ranged defense, it's one of the only Loomians with a decent enough chance to do some damage. And to top it all off, Samarine is 4 times weak to electric type. Alternatively, you could also wait for Joltooth, which you get after the Metal type Battle Theater in the UMV dives, but you can only dive once a day in there and you aren't guaranteed to get the Joltooth fossil. Not to mention, Joltooth is also Ancient type, which would conflict with our next Loomian, which is Igneol. Igneol is accessible in Igneous Hollow, and despite having a low encounter chance, it's pure Ancient type which resists Fire and Water type, both of which are major battle theaters, and with access to moves like Beast's Slumber and Primal Slash, it can become a devastating powerhouse capable of destroying many of the important fights in the game. For our 4th Loomian, I'd let you choose between Blowtox and Barblast. Both evolve from Puff, with Blowtox being the general evolution, and Barblast evolving at level 26 only in Lotsun Beach. But despite being separate evolutions, both are quite tanky, with Barblast having a melee defense stat of 102 and Blowtox having 91. Regardless, what we're interested in here is the typing. Both Loomians are Water Toxic type, and they deal pretty easily with the Banfino of the Water Battle Theater, as well as just general coverage for the rest of our Loomians for anything that's Fire type or Grass type. Finally, for the 5th Loomian to top off the best possible team in the game. This was by far the hardest one to try and figure out. You could probably experiment with your own ideas and Loomians you think might work best on your team, but for the sake of the easiest team to make that will be the strongest possible, I'd say your 5th Loomian should be Revenine. Either that or Wendelin if you don't think you need the Fire type coverage. Spirit type hits Brawler, Mind, and its own type for super effective damage, most of which are types that not many of our other Loomians can easily handle, and paired with both of these Loomians' high speed and ranged attack stats, it could reliably outspeed and inflict quite a bit of damage on the majority of opposing Loomians. So, to recap, I think the best possible team to beat Loomian Legacy with is Valkyrie, Eliguana, Obsidian, Blowtox or Barblast, and Revenine. But let me know what you think. Did I miss some crucial detail? Is there a Loomian that I forgot about that would absolutely plow through the game? I'm curious. This is just something I wanted to do for fun. I'm not the absolute best at planning out these kinds of things, so I probably did miss something, and if so, I'll try to correct myself if I ever make another one of these. I also want to say that I tried to look at these in an objective sense. My personal favorite Loomian is Seer Knight, but that doesn't mean it's viable to beat the game with. You might love Luminami, but please don't get angry that it wasn't put in the team simply because you like its design. With all that said and done, I hope you enjoyed the video. The person who voiced the Eliguana line is LiilYogurt. He made a video with me in it where we played a Pokemon fan game he made, which you can check out on the right there. It's really funny, trust me. If you want to see more of my content, you can click on the video on the left. In a few months, if I end up making a part 2 to this video, it'll be on there. If not, then it might be something else.